At the back, can you see anything? Okay, wave around if at any point you can't hear me or can't see me. We've also got some people joining us from other places in the world through this camera. There's a live stream. Can we like say hi to the people on the live stream? Hi, people on the live stream. Really glad to have you here. Without further ado, the poem that Christina just quoted, I thought I would give some context of before I tell you to fuck yourself. This is not poetry. Strip away your poetry goggles. Remove your rose-tinted signs. These lines will not smell of flowers, will not speak of butterflies, will not compare thee to fucking anything, except what you are. I don't write because it's pretty. Beauty does not interest me. I write because I fear I would die if I stopped. Because silence is killing so many of us. Has killed so many already. 3 last week, 3 this week, 3 next week, and next, and next. If you're searching for stories of love and loss, if you want the kind of suffering you can romanticize, if you're looking for me to be tragically beautiful, helpless, but lit from all the right angles, go look somewhere else. This story is not for you. My story is not for you, it's mine. My story is not the stock photo of the white woman cowering beneath the anonymous male raised hand. My story is not the newspaper pictures of blurry young women tilted in on themselves holding their knees. My story does not exist for your consumption. It's not here for you to sell simplistic narratives of monsters and victims in need of saving. If you're looking for every story you have already read about rape and abuse, go read a newspaper. And go fuck yourself. I've been writing this book for years. At the start, I wrote this book without realizing it was a book. It was a diary. It was a coping mechanism. It was a way to put things into words because I needed to. And then it became something else. I decided that it was going to be a book, and a lot of those things that were diary entries did not make the final cut of the book. Instead, I started writing poems, I started writing stories, less about me and more about us. Less about the problem and more about solutions. It became a testimony to what we can do when we band together, when we organise, when we believe in each other, trust in each other and support each other. Because in the end, there are bits of these books that are to everyone. There are bits of these books that are specifically to the loved ones, the families and friends of victims and survivors, but most of this book is for us who've lived through it. Us who've needed a way to keep going when things have been hard. This is the book that I wrote because I wish someone had written it to me. So I decided to write it myself. This is for us. I want to talk to you because I think you might be lonely. Because I get lonely too. I want to talk to you because I've been there. Because hopelessness is suffocating. Because silence is death. Because enough has to be enough. I want to talk to you because I think there's a together like this for us to meet in. Because this is more than instance upon instance. Because this is more than in this case. Because there is no such thing as unconnected sexual violence. I want to talk to you because the distance between us is impenetrable darkness and it can start to close in on me and there I need a path forward, a way past and through and on, and I think you're it. I think we can build this path together like a bridge. I think we can stand our ground together like a dam. I think we can end the constant flow of violence. I think we can help those who come before us, help those who come after us. I think we can learn from those who came before us. I think we can be the in-between, where all our stories meet. I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's where our fingertips meet, and it's where our arms link, and it's where our voices join. Thank you. So tonight I'm going to share a few poems with you, then we're going to have a panel discussion by some wonderful people, some activists, ambassadors and wonderful organisations, and we're going to talk about concrete ways to do something about that. But to do that I think we need to talk about what the problem is first. I'm going to talk a bit about what the problem is. Because in the end, this is the thing. Whether or not you are personally affected, I think Me Too has shed light for all of us on how many people close to us are personally affected. Even if it hasn't, even if you've just ignored the internet for the last few weeks, I can promise you, statistically speaking, you know a victim of rape. No matter how large or small your friend group, no matter how big your extended family, you are related to a victim. The sad truth is that you already also know a perpetrator. Whether or not you know who, statistically speaking, you already know a rapist. That means that you, whether or not you know it, are already part of the jury. We do some of the most important work in building rape culture, a culture which normalizes, belittles sexual violence, or building the solution, consent culture, a society and a culture in which violence is unacceptable and in which when violence happens we deal with that instead of blaming the victims for it happening. We do the biggest work in building either a rape culture or a consent culture in the way we practice being the jury every day, in what we say or don't say, do or don't do. This is called the jury. Before there is a police report, if there is a police report, before there is a trial, if there is a trial, before there is any attempt at legal justice, there is the jury. The jury is the families and friends, the co-workers and classmates and acquaintances, the ungathered crowd, whose mixed reactions of support or disbelief, of accountability or failure to take any responsibility, that determines everything to come. The jury is the difference between leaving abuse and being forced, coerced, manipulated, shamed and guilted into staying. The jury is the difference between ending violence against the victim and perpetrating even more violence against them. The jury can be abusers too. The psychological abuse of disbelief, of victim blaming, of gossip mongering or gaslighting all over again are doing the abuser's work for them. The jury, quite simply, is the difference between life and death. For a while, the jury is everything. Not because they make decisions about the perpetrator, but because they lay down the law, the ultimate verdict for the victim, the answer to the question, will anyone believe me? The jury deliberates and decides. Thank you. I heard some finger clicks. This is a thing we do in spoken word poetry. If you've been to spoken word or poetry slam events, something that we do when we don't want to disturb the person speaking, but we want to say, I really agree with that, or that was a really beautiful line, or yeah, is this. So if any point during the night you feel like you want to go, yeah, you can instead do this. Just an explanation of what was going on. It wasn't anyone trying to disturb me. I've been thinking a lot about how we come to build rape culture, how rape culture is built. And I think it has a lot to do with the kind of narratives we have about how violence happens and why violence happens and who is to blame for violence. And I think if you look in our public media, if you look at films and television and books, if you look at the kind of stories that we tell about sexual violence, something is fundamentally wrong with it. Far too often we see large-scale media with millions of viewers or readers making sexual violence, making rape a plot twist, making rape a way to punish a female character, making rape a way to build a hero from a man so that he can have revenge for someone close to him having been raped. We see sexual violence used as entertainment and used as a mechanism for telling stories that are not at all based on the reality of what sexual violence looks like, on how it happens and why it happens and who it happens to. And I think if we're to start addressing what those stories actually look like in reality, we first need to address the kind of fiction that we write today about sexual violence and that so many of us watch or read or take part in, that we maybe subconsciously think of as this is what happens, and so anything else that someone close to us tells us can't have been that because it didn't look like this. This is angry. Dear journalists, Dear fiction writers, dear TV producers, let's get one thing straight. We are not your sexual tropes. We are not the punch bag punchline of your rape jokes. We are not your weak, virgin victims versus tragic, not all men. We are not your us and them. We are not your, but then again, we are not your blushing brides. We are not your helpless heroines. We are not your suit yourself. We are not your what did you expect going dressed like that. We are not your you have no one but yourself to blame. We are not your hero makers. We are not your honor to defend. We are not your male protagonist's motivation for revenge. We are not your mechanism of punishment. We are not your plot twist. Not your narrative that persistently dismissing all our knows was how we fell. Hello every chicklet ever. We are not your story to tell. We are not your newspaper headlines about the athletic track records of our rapists. Not your poor perpetrators' shattered careers. Not your Oscar winners and American presidents. Bad ideas. We are not your, but the rapist seems so nice. We are not your victim blame and disbelief, not your demands that our rape kits be publicly published online, not your verdict by popular trial of the victim. Of the victim, and not your truth to define. We are not your simplistic tragic backstory, not your weak victims or strong survivors, not your binary code, not your either or. We are not your sexual fantasy to misspell, and not your story to tell. We are not your romanticized rape in every TV series, not your tingling titillation, not your normalization of sexual violence as entertainment. Not your tired old excuse of, but every female character getting raped is historically accurate. I'm looking at you, Game of Thrones. I'm looking at you, Outlander. We are not your Stockholm Syndrome, Beauty and the Beast, Belle, and we are not your story to tell. So who are we? Globally, we are 1 in 2 trans and non-binary people. We are 1 in 3 women. We are 1 in 5 men. We are 1 in 5 children. We are every lived experience of rape you will never hear over the noise of all this fiction. We are the stories we have learned to live with and never tell, and we are not your fucking stories to sell. Thank you. So, we know what the problem is. We know the problem is big. It's in how we imagine and think about and talk about sexual violence, and it's in how much we don't when it comes to real cases. I think Me Too has done something wonderful in exposing how big the problem is. For a lot of us, it's felt liberatory to be able to talk about these experiences and be believed, to be able to understand how large scale the problem is. But I think sometimes we get caught up in how great it is to talk, and yeah, we need to talk. But talking is not the end of it. Talking is not how we solve it all. And I've lost my bit. There we are. If we're to understand how much work needs doing, I think we need to understand the depth of the problem at it as well. And there are days when I don't feel angry, and I don't feel ready to pick up the fight. There are days when I feel hopeless, and I think anyone who has been through these kinds of things has those days. I think there are days when we feel hopeless because it doesn't end with sexual violence. Sexual violence, as if that wasn't a huge global epidemic of UN proportions as it is not where it ends. Too often, when it comes to sexual violence and sexual abuse and close relationships, the end is murder. In the UK, 3 women are killed by a current or former partner every week. In Sweden, the statistic looks slightly less, but not a tiny bit less terrifying. When we don't interfere, when we don't do anything when sexual violence occurs, we allow it to escalate, and it's costing lives. This is probably the hardest thing I'm ever going to read on a stage. Let's do this. Some days, I feel like I'm standing on a coral reef of dead women, layering one upon the other 3 killed by their partners this week alone. 3 last week, and the week before, and the week before, and the week before. Below them, 12 last month. 144 last year. How many last decade? Last century? 3 upon 3 upon 3. The reef has been building for centuries under the surface, for millennia. We don't talk about the violence that happens behind closed doors. We don't talk about the violence that leaves no visible bruises. We don't talk about what happens beneath marital sheets, in couples' flats, under the roofs of perfectly ordinary families. We don't talk. And for years, the silence has been bubbling away, drowning us. I feel as if I'm standing on a coral reef of dead women. So many generations of silences lie buried here. So many unspoken truths. What stories would they have told if we had let them? What stories would we have told if we had not silenced them with a little domestic is nothing to worry about? And everyone has a rough patch, and that's best kept quiet, dear. Some days I feel as if I'm standing on a coral reef of dead women layered all through human history. But here, at the end of this long line of suffering, here, on top of this funeral pyre, here we are, standing. After all these deaths, all these unreported and unspoken of lives, here we are, standing. And maybe finally, we are close enough to breaking the surface that our voices will be heard. Thank you. I think we've delved into about as deep and dark as this goes. It's time to turn towards, what do? We know the problem is big. We know a huge amount of people are affected and the consequences are horrifying. So what do? That's what we're here for today. We gather, we discuss, we listen. We listen to experts and organisations that have been working at this for years and years, that are doing important things in supporting victims and in bringing about societal change. But it all starts with us listening to victims and taking victim stories seriously. It all starts with someone telling us and us saying, I believe you. I have too many things in this. Let's see. Where are we? 6. I'm just going to give you 2 more poems. So this is the penultimate one. This is called The Roles We Are Cast. Because we need to head back up to some sort of change, some sort of hope, some sort of something. The roles we are cast do not fit us. We are not all broken, not all victim. We do not all forgive our rapists or ever want to. The narrative we are forced into does not fit us. We don't all want to hide, to forget, to get over it. Some of us want justice. Some of us want change. Some of us would rather take revenge in whatever form we can get. It's not pretty. It shouldn't have to be. Some of us are ugly crying. Some of us are fury campaigning. Some of us are tired of this bullshit and want our pound of flesh. It's not your right to judge us. You don't get to decide what the appropriate reaction to rape is. You don't get to feed us our lines, to paint our faces tear-filled but carrying on. Airbrush our eyes hopeful, twist our bodies into poses of sorrow or despair. We are all of these, none of these more. You don't get to continue writing stories where we are saved by religion, by the police, by having babies, by a good man, by a good cry, by a good haircut and a glass of wine. Some of us would rather save ourselves, would rather leave our caves of isolation, riding the dragon and slay the knight in shining armour on our way out. The roles we are cast, we didn't choose ourselves. You did, or history did, or tradition did, and nothing's changed. You want our stories to entertain you, to please you, to make you comfortable, only that's not what we came here to do. We came to hijack narratives written about instead of for us. We came to reclaim our stories, to restart this conversation on our terms. We came to fuck shit up. We're here to survive. You don't get to decide how we should do it. Thank you. Final poem before we turn to a panel discussion and some concrete advice on what we do. What do we do with Me Too? What do we do to build consent culture? What do we do to make a change? And I think the first thing we do is take a stand. To realise that doing nothing is to allow this to continue to happen. To doing nothing doesn't help and it actively hurts. So we need to take a stand. We need to do something. Tomorrow, November 25th, is the UN's International Day Against Gender-Based Violence. Seems like a good time to take a stand. The following 16 days are the International 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. It seems like a good time to do something. So let's. This is the time when we take a stand. They can shout and threaten, or respond with total silence, act like they had no part in this. Like this isn't their problem, their fault. Their fight like rape. Rape is a natural force, without intention or action, an accident. Someone slipped and fell, that's all. You and I will still know what those words mean. We'll still know the truth behind that inaction, because we know what it takes to break it all by speaking out. Because we know the price of truth. And we know where we stand. While they dance around the problem, point fingers and issue blame, we know where we stand. At the centre of it all. Arm in arm with every other survivor, every victim who lived to tell the tale, we know where we stand. Do you stand with us? Thank you.
We're going to start our panel discussion, and with us today we have Caroline Magi from Tillsammans. Yes, welcome. Thank you. And Ida Jonsson from Stjärnjouren. And last but not least, Agnes author.
Give us some space. Is that okay?
So, Agnes.
Yes.
Thank you so much for writing this important book.
Thank you.
You take this very heavy topic of sexual violence and you make raw and honest poetry of it.
Thank you.
So, as an artist, what is your view on the role of art when it comes to society challenges?
I mean, I want to think art can change the world. That's kind of why I do it. It would be really upsetting if it couldn't. I think with things like this, I think often so much of the problem is about how we talk about the issue. And so making art about better ways to talk about the issue, better ways to address the issue and to change the issue, that seems like a meaningful way to be an activist, to be an ambassador, to make a change. And I think that goes for a lot of topics. I think a lot of our passivity, a lot of our apathy when it comes to big societal problems that feel too big to change comes from us having a narrative that there's no option but to either put your whole life into changing an issue or to step out of the issue entirely and not take it seriously. And there needs to be an in-between where all of us can contribute and all of us can make a change while having normal lives where normal things happen. And I think art can be a part of that. I hope so.
Thank you. So in the media and when we discuss sexual violence, we tend to focus on the victim, and that is also something that you mention a lot in your book, and we also had the poem about victim blaming. And the victim is also a lot of the time portrayed as someone who is very fragile and small. And a lot of the victims don't really recognize themselves in this. When we do that, we also tend to put the responsibility of not getting raped on the potential victim. Caroline, you meet people that have experienced sexual violence. What are your experiences when it comes to this?
Yeah, well, the common denominator when we meet survivors are that they don't recognize themselves in these stereotypical images of who the victim is, who the perpetrator is, the rape scenario, and like what consent is, and everything like that. So when they come to us, they are often like comparing their stories to one another, and they feel that they don't deserve to like even have any help. So that is something very sad that we see.
Thank you. So Frida, you meet girls and women and trans people with all forms of questions. Do you think that sexual violence is a common topic in the questions that you get to your organization? And if so, what structural issues do you see that allow this to happen?
Yeah, so one of our main focuses is that we have support chat, mail and phone that people can call for support and empowerment. And sexual assault and violence is our third most biggest topic according to our own statistics from 2016. And I think in the movement for girl support centers in general in Sweden, it's actually the second biggest topic. So it really is a big topic that often comes back. And I agree with you, Caroline. A lot of times the support seekers don't really identify as a victim or realize what they have been happening to them. And I think it's a lot because what you spoke of, that about what the media is telling us is sexual violence, what is sexual abuse, what is but I think this is what Me Too really does so well, is that it's lifting everyone's stories. And I've spoken to so many women that has been saying at first that, oh, I haven't been assaulted or had any sexual violence, but when they hear other people's stories, they're like, that happened to me too. And actually realizing what they have been through was not okay. And I was really touched by one of your lines of how we stand like joined in arms, because that is what these kinds of campaigns do, that they lift our voices and we can hear each other's.
But do you see this as well, Caroline, where there are more people that now can recognize sexual violence and realize that what they've experienced is not okay?
Yeah, I definitely do. Just like you said, I can have a chat with anyone, and they can say that, oh, no, that haven't happened to me. But then when we talk about it, they're like, well, yes, well, I didn't realize that it was rape when my partner was actually starting having sex with me when we were asleep, things like that. So I definitely recognize things you're saying as well.
So do you see a Me Too effect in your organizations? Do you get more phone calls and more people that turn to you?
We've been discussing that, and I think we have always had probably more contacts than we can actually then we have time we can speak to everyone. So it's haven't really been a change in that. It's always been a lot. So what is interesting is now that the whole society and everyone is talking about the thing that we have been knowing for so many years. So now everyone is speaking about our agenda.
Yeah. We actually see an increasement in our mailing. We have this mail where people can just write to us and tell us their stories. And we also have mentors who are role models to survivors, who have their own they are survivors themselves, but they are now role models to others. And we also have support groups where they can get to meet and to just talk about their experiences, and they have a new topic each time those days.
That's great.
Yeah.
Because we can be talking about statistics all day long and about the hundreds of rapes that are committed just in Sweden every day. But sharing these stories like we've been doing during the Me Too movement kind of makes it a lot harder to avoid the subject, and it's not until we actually identify something as a problem that we can start talking about solutions and start doing something about it. So what are your hopes that the Me Too movement will lead to?
Everything. I think what Me Too has been doing is I think that like non-men have always had these have been sharing these stories as like co-op strategy, like to protect each other, to protect friends, like within friend groups or in closed Facebook groups or whatever. And now we're kind of lifting it up and showing it to the world. This is what we've been saying the whole time. And how we can actually continue. I really believe in the younger generation. I think they are so much better than we are. And they know so much more. And I think if we just are like open to them and really acknowledge their stories and tell them, yes, you're right, no one can treat you this way, then I think we'll kind of raise a really, really great generation.
Good. What do you say about that?
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think it both comes from having this general discussion, and a lot of the work that's being done now. I would say a lot of the conversation in Sweden is shifting from just victims and survivors sharing their stories of harassment and abuse and violence to also being about, okay, what do we do to change this? I mean, just today I was opening the daily newspaper, I was opening DN, and about half of their articles, half of the front page was about Me Too, and Me Too in different areas of work, and Me Too in different areas of society, and responsibility being placed on people who can actually make a difference. Being placed on the leaders of large organizations and large corporations, and on the political spectrum. And I think that's really exciting, but I think the most exciting thing is the conversation that's happening through a lot of these generations about how do we avoid racing perpetrators. Because the truth is that right now we are, you know, it doesn't happen from nowhere. And although there are, you know, about 3% of reported rapes have female or other perpetrators, 97% are men. And there's a big discussion happening about how have we allowed masculinity to become something where this is normalized or this is accepted in friend groups or in families or wherever it happens. And I think a big part of what's happening with Me Too is men starting to talk to other men about how to be better men. And I think that's an amazing thing to come out of this. And I think that can make a genuine difference in not just shedding light on crime, but making sure there are fewer crimes being committed.
So you've said that you needed to write this book.
I did.
And that it needed to be written.
Yeah.
And that people tried to stop you.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
But we're happy you didn't.
Yeah,
let them.
Yeah, me too.
So
me too. Well.
So when this book doesn't need to be written any longer, what are you writing about then, and where are we?
Oh, that's going to be such a good world. I'm so looking forward to that. I was asked to do a TED talk recently about sexual violence and how to end it specifically. And what I did was kind of trying to picture, what does a world free from sexual violence look like? What does this future we're trying to bring about look like? And the biggest imagery that kept coming back to me is the future I want to bring about is a world in which everyone of every gender can walk home at 3 a.m, drunk off their faces if they want to be, and look up at the stars instead of on who might be following them. And that came back to me time and time again. It's this sense of what does it mean to be safe in the world that you live in? And it means things like being able to appreciate daily life, like look up at the stars instead of hold keys between your knuckles. Which I think is that's the world it's going to be in. And what I'm going to write about when that world has happened, I'm going to write so much science fiction. I mean, I already am, but I'm going to write so much about alternative futures that are exciting or scary or everything, because maybe the present will be a little bit less terrifying.
Yeah. I think that we all, with the Me Too movement, has finally had some hope that this will actually happen within our lifetimes.
Yeah.
So, what are your, what do you see as the next step in the Me Too movement?
Well, I hope that politicians now see like the magnitude of it, and that they see that porn is a big thing in all of this. We need to regulate the porn, because what we see nowadays, as we call soft porn, was actually hardcore porn back in the days. And since we don't have a very good sexual education in Sweden, porn becomes the, like, what do you say, like
sex ed.
Yeah, exactly, of it. And what we see is that the average age of start consuming porn is 11 years old. And that is
boys.
Yes, boys, and like 2 more years if you're a girl. And that is something I think is we need to look at right now when we see like how big this issue actually is. And then we also have to recognize that we can't end sexual violence if we don't have men in this discussion, because I'm so tired of talking with women about women, and it's
For women.
yeah, for women, and it's like, where is the men? Seriously, we need to have more men.
Yeah.
So step up.
No pressure.
Exactly. So, before we get to listen to our final poems for tonight, and before you can go and get all of your cool fata stuff and mingle with our organizations that are here today, and obviously get the copy of We Need to Talk signed,
If you want.
I want to know, what do you see as the solution to battling sexual violence? I can start with you, Frida.
Oh, wow. I think we really, as you said, like focus on the perpetrators. We can't raise any more perpetrators. And that's one of the things that we do. We go out in schools and have workshops about okay sex, what is okay, and like start the discussion. And often when we're out and like when we're done, the students say they have never had anything like that before. They haven't discussed it. There's so many like things they haven't really thought of or even knew. So I think it's information, starting discussions with the people that needs to hear it.
And who are those?
It's the perpetrators we're trying not to raise. It's young men. It's grown-up men as well. As for example the initiative Killmiddag. I think is a really great initiative. To get men to start speaking about toxic masculinity. What can they do among each other?
So Killmiddag is an initiative from Make Equal, where men have dinners together and talk about these types of subjects, and also talk about feelings, because we see that men tend to talk about emotions and things like this a lot less than women do. So if you want to have a Killmiddag, go to Make Equal's webpage and sign up.
Yeah, and I just think that all of us need to like question ourselves and ask, what is my behavior like, and why do I find this joke funny, and what turns me on, and why is that? And and that can be scary, and that's why I think that a lot of men, sorry all of the men here, but that's why I think that you don't do that, because it's scary. But that is something we need to do in order to end this rape culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. What do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from It comes from us believing victims. I mean, I completely agree that we need to address perpetrators, but in terms of everyone who has been a victim so far, everyone who will be a victim before this magical future where I will write science fiction comes about, we need to start taking victims seriously. We need to stop asking victims for proof as if we are the police when we are their friends or their family members or people close to them. It is the worst kind of violence we can do to someone who's already been put through way too much. And I see this again and again with people who turn to me. I see this again and again with my friends and my family members, that we question and we disbelieve victims because we don't want to deal with the consequences of their stories being true. We don't want to deal with the consequences of having to unfriend their perpetrator on Facebook. We don't want to deal with the consequences of having to fire their perpetrator. We don't want to deal with the consequences of having to make public statements to get their perpetrator fired or to move their platform. And I think we need to start recognizing that us not taking those actions is violence to the victims.
So what is a good thing to do if you meet somebody who's experienced sexual violence?
If someone tells you in any way, shape or form that they've been harassed, abused or assaulted, the first thing you tell them is, I believe you, what can I do? Anything less than that is not good enough. That's where we start.
Good, thank you. Fatta believes that we need to change the norms regarding gender and sexuality that allow this to keep on happening, and it's been going on for so long. So that needs to be changed. We also need more resources to all the professionals that meet victims within their job. So that's everything from teachers to care and the police, our court systems, the whole way. And we also want everybody, but especially people who identify themselves as men, to start examining themselves and to start taking responsibility and to actually step up and say no when there's behavior or jokes or anything that allow this culture to exist.
Locker room talk, as Donald Trump put it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we finally, after all these years of working, have a suggestion of a consent law here in Sweden. And we now expect our politicians to step up and make it happen.
And it might actually go through before the end of the year.
Yeah.
Isn't that right? So when we go into 2018, we could actually have a modern, functioning consent law. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, so I know all of you who've stood for almost an hour are probably quite tired right around now. I'm going to read you about 2 more poems. Well, exactly 2 more poems. And then there's drinks if you want some. Everything's alcohol free. And there's snacks of various kinds. And our organisations are represented in the room over there. There's information from them. They're selling things like jewellery to support their causes. They're selling things like t-shirts. And they do amazing work. Just help them do amazing work. A lot of them are also looking for members or activists or people to get involved. If you have time, please donate your time. If you have money, please donate your money. If you have neither, please read up and do what you can do in your daily life. They've got brochures and pamphlets and things to help you out. Okay, we're diving into the hopeful stuff now, because it's going to be a big fight and it's going to be a long fight and we're going to need some motivation along the way. So I think a good place to start, because that's where I began this whole thing, is with us as victims and survivors. I don't know how many of us there are in this room, but I promise you there are too many. And so we need to talk about what happens next. This is called What Do We Do? What do we do when the violence is over? When it feels like it never really ends? What do we do when we're no longer in danger, but we're never really safe? What do we do with the rest of our lives? The rest of our days? With those mornings when everything already feels lost, what do we do with the violence? We speak. We speak because we have to. Because the alternative is suffocation, is going back under the surface again, is giving in to our abusers' voices in the backs of our heads, is letting violence win. We listen. We listen for the other voices, the ones that remind us we are not alone in this, that we will never be alone in this again, that there are those who've walked our paths, those who can help illuminate the next step, or just make sure we are not alone as we figure out our own journeys. We change. More than ourselves and more than adaptation, more than the bad days, sometimes so unbearable, all you can do is hold on. And more than the good days, sometimes so glorious, so sunshine-filled, you doubt whether the bad days ever truly happened. More than ourselves, we change together. We build support, communities, movements. More than ourselves, we change the culture that put us here, the systems that enabled and enforced and allowed this. More than ourselves, we change the world. Thank you. And this book is in part to all my fellow victims and survivors, and there are sections of this book that are particularly for them, for us. They're talking less about the issue in detail. They are meant to be safe to read, even if you're in a really difficult place in your recovery right now. They're meant to be untriggering. There are parts of this that are particularly to friends and family, because a lot of us, friends and family, need a guide. And this is some steps along the way to make sure that you support your loved one properly and that you don't do further damage to someone who is already hurting, but that you support them and you make sure they're okay. Parts of this book are to everyone. Parts of this book are about the problem. The final section is called Everyone We Need to Start Doing. And the final subsection is called How to Change Everything. I've been a bit ambitious here. Final poem for tonight. How to change everything. 1. Start with yourself, with learning, with reflecting, with examining your attitudes, your behaviours, how experiences might differ from yours. Move outwards. Speak to those around you, ask questions, listen, reflect, propose change, propose togetherness, team up, think big, read up. There's more than individual experience here. More than statistics and facts in play, there is plenty to learn. If you're willing to listen, to read, to think, make it a journey, make it a mission, make it worthwhile. Learn about the laws, the police practices, the histories of violence written on our bodies. Join arms. Let those who've lived it walk through first. But join in the second rank. Follow their lead. Amplify their voices. Build on their strategy. Enter their movement. Add to their strength. Make a plan. Make a change. Make a difference. And change everything. Thank you so much for coming. Tomorrow is the UN's International Day Against Gender-Based Violence. If there was ever a day to sign a petition to get consent legislation in Sweden, if there was ever a day to join an organisation that is doing amazing work, if there was ever a day to tell everyone in your life, if you have been through something like this, I believe you, what can I do? If there was ever a day, that day is today. And then we'll be ready for tomorrow. And the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence that follow. There's going to be loads of campaigns going on in Sweden and around the world. Please join in. We need you as part of this movement. Thank you for coming.